Hi there, Hyanna Natsu here. Today I bring you a hair tutorial, sponsored by Clip Studio Paint. Hair can be hard, but it's so enjoyable to draw, and it allows you to express so much of the character. Hopefully, I will help you learn something today, no matter your skill level. Let's begin! And we start with the most important tool, references. It's very hard to draw things when you don't check what they look like in real life. So every time you are stuck, search for photos, not just anime drawings, but actual people. Where, you ask? Well, there's plenty of places. You can go on Pinterest, DeviantArt, Instagram, etc. And if you think that's cheating, copying, or stealing, it's not. Every great artist uses references, and how to use them is a topic for another video. Now, let's talk about an important point on how hair works in anime. Did you notice how many features are simplified, such as mouth and nose? But at the same time, the eyes and hair are given more detail than they have in real life. This brings extra attention to them, and that is used to express the character's personality. Because of this, you can communicate a lot about how the character is and feels with the hair. But most important, it's a drawing. You can do it more flowy and even floating, because yes. Take a look at your favorite anime drawings. How does the hair make you feel? Does it tell you something about the character, even if you can't put it into words? This is why the previous point on references is important. Sometimes you want your drawing to feel like something, but you don't even have a word for it. Maybe some spike angles will feel edgy, some weight will feel serious, some fluff curls will feel warm and welcoming. Any theory behind this would have to be as complex as human emotions, but your heart can tell. So, let's draw some hair and explain things along the way. We will go with wavy hair. It's something many of you mentioned in a recent poll I did. When you start, just outline some chunks of hair that you think will look good. I do not think too much about them. I just make loose curves or S shapes that seem to look good. If they don't look good, I will delete them and start again. Never be afraid to delete your work and start over if you feel like it. As you can see, sometimes the hair interacts more with the character or objects on the scene. In cases like this, you can work in steps. I want hair to be holding a bit of hair, so I drew that before thinking about how it connects. And if something doesn't look right, delete what's bad and do it again. Since we are just in the sketching stage, we can stretch and move parts of the drawing freely. Just make a selection and use the transform tool. It also means this is a point where you should try out ideas. Don't move on until you like the idea. It doesn't matter if you are a novice and your drawing skills are still rough. You can have cool idea for the pose and it will show through. Don't expect ideas to just come by themselves either. It can take a while, and it's fine. If you already know part of the idea you want, sketch that and look at it for a bit. You can build up your scene in slow steps. And if something doesn't work, it's better to change it during the sketch. In anime hair, the laws of physics are just a suggestion. It can flow around like a dog's tail, just because she's a happy girl. And in general, you should make sure the drawing doesn't look stiff. I think a good drawing feels like it could move at any moment. The hair takes an important role in this, because it's so lightweight and dynamic. Think about the wind, the character's current movement, and the feeling you want to communicate. Again, anime hair is very forgiving and expressive. Remember to do long lines, not short chicken scratches. If the line doesn't look like you wanted, undo and try again. Don't try to build the line in small steps. With time, you might have to Ctrl-Z less often, but it's still my #1 shortcut. Speaking about digital tools, I think a lot of novices get overwhelmed when they start using drawing software. It's understandable to ask questions like which brush settings should I tweak? Or what canvas size? Believe me, all of that doesn't matter that much when you get started. In fact, I used the default brushes that came with the drawing software, and I picked A4 paper as canvas size well before I knew what DPI was. And I still can't think in terms of DPI, so you get that it's not too important when you start. Just go with defaults at first. Your focus should be on the drawing. Don't worry, you will learn all these tools as you keep practicing. Also, you may ask, is it okay to draw on paper? Yes, it is. And that's what I did at first, before I had a drawing tablet. You can use the computer to do vector line art on a paper sketch, even with a mouse, or even just do minor adjustments, or add color. Drawing on paper is even good as practice for those of us that usually draw on the computer. I sometimes move my fingers to press Ctrl-Z on the table, forgetting it's not there. It will force you to make less mistakes, and it's nice to touch your drawing. That said, I recommend that you pick a drawing tablet you can afford. It doesn't have to be fancy either. Screen tablets definitely aren't necessary to make digital art, nor does it have to be a Wacom. And once you get used to the features of a software like Clip Studio Paint, they help a lot. Okay, let's go back to talking about the hair. It's okay if you look at me drawing all this hair in front of you and you are still lost. When you look at a lot of small details, it looks complex. But when you look at each detail, it's simple. Hair is chaotic, so you don't have to be precise with each chunk of hair. Once in a while, you should take a step back and look at the whole picture to see if all details look good together. If you have been drawing for several hours, it's also good to take a look on the next day with fresh eyes. Always ask yourself, does it look good? And if not, why? Try to answer those questions constantly. And I mean try, because that's the process. It's, more about the journey than the destination, I guess. Here's something more about that. References. Remember to keep a handful of references when you draw. It doesn't have to be an example of the thing you want to draw itself. They can be assorted references for things like light or feel, or some detail you want to get right. Say someone drew a short hair that you really like. You can look at that drawing while making a long hair yourself. If you look at the references I use for drawings, you wouldn't see the resemblance, but they help a lot. And if the artist has speed paints for their drawings like I do, you can take a look at how each detail is done. It's fine if you don't get something at first, or if you need to look at reference material constantly. You know the frustration of feeling lost? Well, that's when you learn the most. So keep it up and make the yesterday you proud. Now, you may notice I cleaned up my sketch instead of doing a separate line art. Depending on the style, I just clean the sketch. It is quicker than doing the line work from scratch. There isn't a right way to do it, and you might want to do it only one way or both. Both methods follow the same rules. The difference is that I am drawing the same layer, instead of tracing the sketch in a new one. It might even be harder to do it this way if you are getting started, but it is a time saver for me. It also keeps some of the sketch feel, which most of the time has some kind of interesting charm I love. Some artists even skip cleaning up the sketch and do a painting style instead. Keep in mind, line weight is different from line opacity or density. My brush is not fully opaque, so when I'm lighter my hand, the color comes out less intense. For places where I want it to have more weight, I make the brush larger or thicken the line. Where to thicken it? The easiest rule is where the lines intersect, but it obviously doesn't apply to every line. There are some spots where you want to keep it simple and light, so the lines should be like that. Another rule would be where shadows goes, but you would need to know beforehand the kind of shading you will be doing. So let's recap and answer some common questions. How do I make flowy hair? Use S-curves. Sometimes it will be a more open S, sometimes tighter. Think about the shape first, then how it works after. Lighten your touch and let your hand wander more freely. Try to make what looks good make sense, rather than making what makes sense look good, if that makes sense. For example, straight hair is a long open S, like so. Wavy one you can have so much fun doing happy S all around. Think of funny snakes. Curly gets special treatment. Here's how I do it. Do a spring. The way you do it will change the final result. Then define where's the front part. Add lines to make it thick, just like a hair strand. You sorta can think of hair strands like strips of paper in this part. Delete what shouldn't be visible. And there you go, you have a pretty curl. But you don't need to do this for the whole hair. Just 2 or 3 strands should be good, as the hair gets simpler in the back, needing less details. Where does the hair start? How to draw bangs? To be honest, I don't think of that very much, since I start with the bangs. And usually I don't even have the top part of the head drawn. So you see, I start with the overall shape of the bangs. Then the top line will kinda define how big her forehead is. Some of us are blessed with big, shiny, round foreheads, so it's fine if yours end up big. But be reasonable and make it the size that looks good in your character. Once you have the top of the skull drawn, you can just add some lines and call it good. At least I say it's good enough. You can make it fancier as you get better. How large should each chunk of hair be? You can first do very large ones, and then break it down as you need. The more sections you add, more detail and complex it will become. How to do a decent hairline art? Here's a couple of key points. Pong, long lines. Pong, thicker where shadows can go, or where lines intersect. Now, let's go add color to our drawing and tackle more questions after. I will color one side of it white and another black, because those were the most requested on a recent poll I did. Before anything, define where your light source is. I enjoy saying, "It's from everywhere," when I'm too lazy. Because there's places you can put the shadows that make sense no matter where the light comes from. For some reason, I like to make the light coming from the top left, so everything on that side will cast shadow on the things on the right. The chances that I will go against that rule are very high though, hehe. And as general first step, I roughly apply the dark colors, without the fine shape. This is to test if it will look good. You can zoom out and see if there is a good balance between light and shadows. Also, the colors can be temporary, as you can play with them later on, or test out on this point as well. Once the general shape is laid out, I start polishing them. There isn't secrets for this. The more lines you add, more complex it will look. I also like to add backlight, or that's how I call it. Simply a different color to add dimension to it, I guess. I tend to go towards purples and grays for the most of colors. You can wonder how to make black and white hair not look gray, purple, etc. If you use similar colors to what you have around your drawing, it will end up looking the right tone. If hair shirt was red, I would add more red tones on the hair. I have a big tendency of using the colors already on the drawing and play around with them. One thing that makes things easier to me is grabbing the darkest color, then with my brush in low density, doing a blob, and then color picking this blob and using the color. I maybe even do it multiple times to get a tone that works with the others. Let's get a bit more into it. Picking the right color is hard, but that's the thing. There is no right color. Play with them. Red doesn't need to be shaded with red. There's this thing called ambient light and light bounce. I honestly know nothing about the technicalities of this stuff, but imagine the character inside of a white or blue room. You can add a bit of that on the hair, be it black, red, green, blue, any color. You don't need to go fancy about the shading. I took years to build up my style, and I played with the simple shading too. There are species that for sure benefits from simpler coloring, because sometimes you want to call attention to another element of the drawing, or you will be doing a background, or simply because you enjoy anime style. Either way, test what's in your level and play around with that. Patience is the key through the whole process. This part is very fun, and there's many ways to add shine to the hair. Yes, even white hair. See, I like to airbrush the skin color on the bangs, and then I can add white highlights on top, and it will show. If you don't know the color to use, you can take the hair color, create a new layer and set in Add Glow, and then do blobs, triangles, lines, etc. Any shape works. Do what fits your taste. Then you can use hue and saturation to change the color to the right tone. I also enjoy adding extra hair strands on a top layer to give it an extra flow. And messy hair, because we all struggle with that, right? And here's the finished art. What do you think? I quite liked this character. I created her for this tutorial. Should I make her my new OC? Well, let's do another quick recap and answer some questions. How to know where to put shadows? Imagine it like a ball in your room. Simple as that. Yes, that boring art tip. How to make it look like realistic hair? I don't work with realistic hair, but start simple and make it fancy as you understand how it all works, in your own terms. How many layers for the hair? I started using one per color, but as I build up a workflow, I reduced them to only one or two, depending if I want to test out things, but use as many as you need. How to use colors? Best tip is to play with them. Really, try pink on blue, purple and green, orange and yellow, and so on. Have fun. Do you use blending modes like multiply and screen? Depends. Most of the time I use none. But for gradient hair, I shade using multiply layer and highlight with Add Glow. How to make highlights? Use a lighter color than the hair color and do any shape that works for you. Can you change a hair color without doing it from scratch? Yes, but not all colors. When it can be done, I use Selection tool. On CSP, it is a very smart selection, and with options you can tweak until it fits your needs. And then play with hue and saturation to achieve the color you want. But it's always best to do it with the right color from the start. Sometimes it just doesn't look right, and I have to do it from scratch. Such as from white to red would be best to do it all again, but red to brown would work perfectly. How to make the eyebrows or eyelashes transparent? In the Lineart layer, you can make the color lighter by locking the layer and painting with the color using the brush. Anyway, let's wrap it up. Maybe you watched it all until here and you are still unsure how to draw hair. And I don't expect you to suddenly be a pro at it. As I've said, art takes time. So take what's important from this. Use references. I can't repeat this enough, so use them in a mindful way. If it starts to look like you copied something, remember to credit the artist. Also, try to develop your own style. I believe you don't need a step-by-step to actually learn something. Instead, try to understand the things in your own way. You don't need to know technical stuff to draw well. Not saying you shouldn't study them. Things should make sense in your own mind. And as long as you enjoy what you do, and you are up for the challenges life will bring, you will grow as artist. Practice is the key, but patience and passion is the door. Now I've said some pretty words, and you are touched by how wise and amazing I am. Show me you also can be amazing, and draw a piece with what you have learned from this tutorial. You can share it on Twitter using hashtag HyanHairChallenge. On this challenge you must do colored hair, so you can draw the character I did on this video, create your own, or a fan art. The link to the image will be on the description. And I can do a video sometime this year reacting to your drawings, and maybe give some tips on how to improve, if you are fine with that. Thank you very much if you watched until this point. And thanks Clip Studio for sponsoring me. It's a great piece of software. I've recently switched to it due to the amount of tools it offers, sure to make my work a lot smoother. I also learned things along the way, so I'm grateful. I sure hope to do more in the future. So that's it for now everyone. Do your best, and see you around. Bye bye.